What's up, guys? It's that time of year now where it's fall. It's getting cold, the leaves are starting to change. As you can see right here, like the color of the leaves has changed. You can see your breath at nighttime. So it's that time of year where we got to start thinking about putting away the Seadoo and winterizing the Seadoo. So I've been scouring the internet. I've read manuals, I've been reading different blogs, watched multiple YouTube videos, and what I found was that, like, people had different parts of the winterization process online, but it was hard to really find something that was just a complete A to Z winterization process. I'm a complete newbie at this. I've never done this before, so if I can do it, I think anybody can do it. So I figured I would just share with you guys how I'm going to winterize my Seadoo. So this is my Seadoo. It's a 2017 Wake Pro 230. Had a lot of fun with it during the winter time, during the summertime. But now we got to put her away for the winter time. So I'm just going to take a look quickly. I figured I'd take a video of it before I start the process, just so I know where all the components are. And so I know how to put it together, and also for next season, so I know what I did this time around. So here's the fuel cap right there. On this model, the seat goes up, and so it exposes the engine compartment, and so that's the engine right there. These are the ignition coils right here. There's 3 ignition coils. This apparently is the injector bar right there. On this side right here we have the coolant, and I've noticed that the coolant is very low, so I don't know if you can see it there, but there's really nothing in there, so I'm gonna have to replace the coolant. And then we have the battery compartment. So there's the battery right there with all its connectors. Online I've seen many people take it off different ways. This is a little bit different than what I've seen online, but I think the general concept is since we're taking out the battery, we have to subtract the battery. So we take off the negative first, which is this black one right here, and then the positive, which is the red one. So we'll have to disconnect that in that order, and we'll have to somehow take it out of its compartment for storage. And then we also need to flush the exhaust system. So on these particular models, there's a flush port, which is right there. There's also drain ports, which is one drain right there and one over here. But we will have to flush some antifreeze through that port to be able to get any water out. If there's any water, we leave some antifreeze behind so that it doesn't freeze during the winter time. Because usually, it's the water in there is from the cooling system. The exhaust and cooling system is from the lake, and so this water does get into that system there. So that's about it. So those are the components, and so we're just going to get started now. The things we need to do for the winterization, and the order that I've decided that I want to do it in, is we need to put some fuel stabilizer in the fuel tank. So what they recommend right now, my fuel level is about a half tank. So what they recommend is putting some fuel stabilizer in there while it's half to a quarter, and then fill it back up so that at least it mixes in the fuel tank. They recommend that it should be about 95% full at least, so that you don't get condensation buildup in the tank, and so that it's okay during the winter time. So I'm going to put some fuel stabilizer in the tank. And then during the whole winterization process, when we turn on the machine, at least that some of that fuel stabilizer will go through the whole system. So the fuel stabilizer that I've decided to use is this one right here, the Stable fuel stabilizer. Got it you can get it from any local store like Home Depot. I got this from Canadian Tire. We're in Canada, so it's pretty easy to get a Canadian Tire. Not that expensive. I think it was about $10, $9 to $10. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some of this fuel stabilizer in a jerry can of fresh fuel that I brought in. So I'm going to add the fuel stabilizer to the jerry can, and then I'm going to put that into the Seadoo there. So So with the fuel stabilizer, you have to read the directions. Basically, the directions say you want to pour 1 ounce, which treats up to 9.5 liters of fuel. I know from the specs of my machine that the fuel tank is a 60-liter tank. So if 1 ounce feeds about 10 liters, then I need about 6 ounces. And it's got this handy, basically, measurement device here on the top, which lets you measure the ounces. So right now it's about 1 ounce. So I'm going to open this. I'm going to put 6 ounces into my jerry can over here, and then I'm going to fill the fuel tank with the jerry can. And if there's anything that basically is left over, for example, if it's not filled, then I'm just going to bring some more fuel and just fill up the Seadoo so that it's completely, at least 95%, if not full. So just to recap, I've put 6 ounces of stabilizer into my jerry can. I used the jerry can and filled up the Seadoo with the mixture, and it is now at full. So the fuel stabilization is in there, and it's ready to go. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is refill the engine coolant, which I didn't realize was low. I basically just unscrewed this, popped it off, and it's hard to see, but the reservoir has actual markings that say minimum and maximum. So I'm just going to put enough fluid so that it's basically somewhere in between the minimum and the maximum amount. So I'm just going to put a funnel on this and put the fluid in there. Basically what I'm using is something that I just got from the local, again, Home Hardware, Home Depot store. It's called the antifreeze coolant for all vehicles. It's a 50-50 mix, long life, and it's supposed to be good for aluminum combustion as well too, which it says on the back there, aluminum and cast iron components, and that's what, for Seadoo at least, that's what you want to make sure that it's okay to use. It says all vehicles, makes, models, and years, so I figured that this would probably be the best one to use. It was about 15 bucks at the local Canadian Tire here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put this into here using a funnel and fill it up to the correct amount. Not a lot of space to work with in these compartments, that's for sure. But we're going to do our best here and fill it up as much as we can. I want to be careful not to spill anything in the engine compartment. So I'm just going to take a look at the level here again, see where we're at. And I can see the fluid, the level is right about there. And as I said, the minimum was supposed to be here, the maximum was up here, so it's kind of in between. So I think that that's probably going to be enough engine coolant. And I was actually surprised that I was running so low on the fluids here. So I'm glad I caught that. Oops, sorry about that. I'm glad I caught that, and I'm glad I was able to fill that. So the next thing we're going to do is put plumbing antifreeze into the exhaust system. So is this one here, just got it from Canadian Tire, it's only about $5. And then hooked up a normal garden hose that's been cut, and I just hooked up a funnel to the end of the garden hose so that it'd be easy to use just gravity. And we're going to use gravity just to pour the antifreeze into the funnel. First thing we want to do is make sure that we turn on the engine, and then we put the antifreeze on. Wait till it comes out of the exhaust system. I'm just using a bucket there to collect in the antifreeze. You can probably use that, put it down the sink or the toilet inside the cabin if you really want to help with the pipes down there. But really we just want to make sure that we're flushing antifreeze through the whole exhaust system until it comes out the other side. But the main thing to remember is engine goes on first, then antifreeze through the hose, and then you stop that, and then the engine stops last. So you never want to have stuff flowing through the exhaust system while the engine is off, because that could potentially flood the engine as well. So that's what we're going to do. All right, so now we've basically done the engine flush, or sorry, the exhaust system flush, and the next thing we're going to do is change the oil. So that's, and we've already had the Seadoo running for a little bit to flush out the engine. That also has, you know, the fuel stabilizer that we put into the gas tank, that's now had a chance to make its way through the system as well too, which is good. So it had dual purpose, the flushing. One was to flush the actual system, and secondly, it allowed us to get that fuel stabilizer through the system. And thirdly, it actually heated up the engine oil a little bit, which is also what they recommend doing before we change the oil. So here is the filler the oil filler cap, and this is the dipstick right here. So what we're supposed to do is we're supposed to remove the dipstick. We're going to undo the filler cap here as well. And then I've bought a pump system from Amazon, which is this thing right here. It's hooked up to a clear vinyl tube. They say about 18.5 inches is what the end of the tube should go into the dipstick holder. And then we're going to pump out as much oil as we can through this system. This thing was only about $30 on Amazon, but it's supposed to be able to pump out all the oil, and that way we can get rid of the oil. And we're looking to get at least about 3.5 to 4 liters if possible, and the reservoir on this one has about a 4-liter limit as well. I also got this oil change kit from Amazon as well too. It contains the oil as well as the filter, the O-rings, which is right here, and then a couple bottles of the synthetic oil, which is 5W40 synthetic blend. It's meant for marine engines, I believe. Comes from, I believe, Bombardier or Seadoo as well. So I figured for the first time doing this, might as well go for the actual kit. I'm sure in the future we can just buy these things individually, but it was quite handy that it came as an actual package. So that's what we're going to do right now. We're going to take out the oil, and we're going to siphon off as much as we can from here. And we're going to turn on the engine in drown mode, which they call, which basically means holding down the throttle fully and then turning it on. And that's cranking it a couple times and then putting the siphon back into the dipstick holder and siphoning up more oil. So basically, apparently the drown mode cranking just gets some more of the oil out of there for the oil change. After the oil change, we're going to take out the oil filter, which is right here, and we're going to replace the oil filter as well. Okay, so basically what we're going to do now is we're going to put this into the dipstick holder. We put a piece of duct tape at around 18.5 inches just so we know around where it's supposed to go. So we're just going to feed that in here, and unfortunately this tube is too thick. So a bit of a hiccup there. It looks like the tube that came with the package is too big for this dipstick holder. So I'm going to have to, next time I come back out, I'm going to have to go to, let's say, Home Depot. I saw it at Home Depot. They have different sizes of tubes. I'm going to have to get something that's thinner and then connect that up to the rest of the housing here. But basically, I might even just wait to do that next spring now, because apparently you don't really need to do that right away. But we'll wait till next spring to do the actual oil change, and I'll bring the right tubing as well. But essentially, you know, the process is, as I mentioned here, you know, you put this tube through the dipstick holder, you pump out as much oil as you can using this device or any other pump device, and then you put the Seadoo in drown mode by, you know, pulling on the throttle and then pressing the start button. Let it crank for a couple of seconds, put the tube back in to the dipstick holder, pump out some more oil, and do that about 2 or 3 times. You could even then, you know, in the filler area here, you can probably put the tube in there and try to suck out some oil as much as you can from there as well. And then you put everything back together. You put the dipstick back in, you put the filler cap back in, you check your dipstick and see if you've got enough oil. And remember that you're putting the oil back in through here, the new oil. And so you check your dipstick level, make sure that you have the right amount of oil. If you don't, you just keep adding over here. And then once you're done, you go over to this side you undo this screw right here. This whole housing comes out, and then you replace the old oil filter with a new one, and then you just put that back in there as well. So we're going to leave that till the spring now, because it didn't, unfortunately the housing wasn't the appropriate housing to be able to fit in my engine here. So what I'm still going to do though, I'm still going to fog the engine though. So what I have to do next now is, once I put these dipstick and filler cap back on, I'm going to remove these ignition coils, which basically means you have to remove the wiring, which are these guys right here, remove these screws as well too, and then the ignition coils are supposed to just be able to come right out. And then there's spark plugs at the bottom of that, so we're going to use a socket system to be able to take the spark plugs out, and then we spray the engine fog in there. So that's what we're going to do next. Okay, so what we're going to do now, so I've loosened the ignition coils, which are these ones right here. It required me to press pretty hard on this tab right here, so I had to press and then push backwards. And I also have to unscrew these guys, these screws right here, which keep the ignition coils in. Basically, you just use something called, in the kit it says T30, and if you can see that. But basically, I just attach that to an extension socket. So I'm just going to put that on here and just loosen these guys. So I'm going to loosen all three of them, and then I'm just going to pull these ignition coils out just like that. So what I've done here now, so I've taken out the screws, and then I've taken this off, the ignition coil, the wires you were on here, I pulled those out. So I've done that for all three of these, and now we're just supposed to be able to just wiggle these things free. So I think it takes a bit of effort. Well, there we go. So it came out pretty easy. And then there's supposed to be spark plug at the bottom of that. So I'm going to use a rag, and I'm just going to make sure that there's no oil dripping anywhere or anything like that. And I'm just going to take out all three of them, and then I'm going to try to take out the spark plugs as well too. As you can see, so the three ignition coils are out now. Those were the screws and the socket that went with them. And inside you can see way in there, those are the spark plugs. So there's a spark plug there, and spark plug in the third one as well. So what there's a spark plug socket 5/8 that I'm going to try to use as an extension with that as well too. So I'm going to put that in there and loosen up every spark plug and take the spark plug out. They do say that once I loosen the spark plug, I can actually use the ignition coil, the bottom of the ignition coil, to actually go into the hole, grab the spark plug and take it out that way, if my socket doesn't do that. So that's what I'm going to try to do now. Sorry for all the noise in the background there. We've got one spark plug out, so what I'm using is that extension again. I'm just fitting it down there, fitting the spark plug snug in there. I'm going to try by hand if I can actually do it. And it seems like it's coming out pretty easy by hand. If not, I'm just going to put it in a little bit deeper. There we go. I heard that click now, so now I can actually loosen it up. There it goes. Should be able to do it by hand now once it's loosened up, so it seems like it's coming out pretty easy now. And there it is. There's the spark plug. Comes out pretty easy with the spark plug socket. So I have to say it's pretty nice having this spark plug socket, which essentially has a rubber thing at the bottom of that, and so that is able to grab the spark plug, so I don't really even need to use the ignition coils to be able to take these out. So just cleaning them out a little bit. So we've got two spark plugs out. We're going to grab the third one now. We've got all the spark plugs out now. As you can see, there's just an empty hole in each of the three cylinders that we got. Here's the three spark plugs. I put them just in order, like, you know, the first one, second one, third one, and I just tried to keep the spark plugs in order to I like to stay organized just to make sure that we've got everything, and I've got just a rag underneath there to catch and clean up any of the oil and stuff like that. So what I'm going to do now is fog the engine, they call it. So what I've gotten from, again, local store, Canadian Tire, it's called fogging oil. Protects against engine corrosion during storage. It's got that little red nozzle there that's supposed to give you the extension onto it. So I'm going to hook that up to the engine oil, and I'm going to basically spray the fogging oil directly into those holes there. And I'm going to crank the engine in drown mode, as I mentioned before, which basically is, again, full throttle, and then pressing the stop button for a couple of seconds. I'm going to do that a couple of times to be able to get the engine fog oil to be just circulating through there. I've attached the extension nozzle now to this fogging oil. It says to shake the bottle, so I'm going to shake it a couple of times. And then it says basically spray in each cylinder for 5 to 10 seconds. So what I'm just going to do is put that all the way in there and just spray it for 5 to 10 seconds, as I mentioned. So I've sprayed the engine oil, or the engine fog oil, in every cylinder. I have to say I really did not like this extension. I had to use both hands to keep the extension on the nozzle. Every time I let it go, it would fly off. At one point, it actually flew off into the hole there, and I had to use needle nose pliers to get it back out. So really not a big fan of this extension, but in the end I just sprayed it, held it with both hands, and I'm going to crank the engine now to just get the fogging oil all the way. So the engine fog oil is all in these cylinders now. When I was cranking, just a little kind of piece of advice, I just put this over the holes while I was cranking the engine, because sometimes oil can splutter out there, so that just at least keeps it closed. And as you can see, like, there was oil kind of sputtering out, so this at least keeps your engine bay clean. I'm going to reinstall these spark plugs and the ignition coils, reattach all the wires, and then move on to the battery next. So the one other thing they recommend is to use this something called anti-seize material, which we basically need to put onto the spark plug threads so that next time they're easy to come out and that they don't get stuck within the socket. So what I'm just going to do is, it has a little applicator, and apparently not supposed to apply very much, so we're just going to apply a little bit to the threads here, not above, just to the threads, and not too much. I'm going to use a glove, so I'm going to glove my hand and then just use my finger to put it on there, and then put the spark plugs back into the sockets. So there you have it. So I basically have put the two connectors, ignition coils, back on. Here's the third one. It just goes back in the hole like this. Make sure it completely aligns like it did before. It's kind of hard to do with one hand. And basically we're just going to push it down, and then this just connects up again like it did before, snapped into place. That one's nice and aligned. See, the holes are aligned. I'm just going to screw these back in just like that for all three of them, and that takes care of the engine fogging. Okay, so what we've done is I first disconnected the black wire from the housing, negative first, and then basically the positive, or the red one, I've disconnected that. Now I'm just going to basically unconnect the battery holder, which is this thing right here. There's a little floppy thing here, so I'm going to disconnect that and then take the battery out, and that should be it for the battery. And I've realized it was a bit hard to get this battery out, but this latch comes off, which is kind of nice. And now I can just pick the battery up out of its compartment like so, and it's hard to do with one hand, so I'm going to let this camera down, but basically with two hands I'm just going to lift it right out now. Okay guys, well, that's the end of the winterization process. Just to recap, first what we did was we put fuel stabilizer in the gas tank. We made sure that the gas tank was at least 95% full. Then next we flushed the exhaust system with plumbing antifreeze. We filled up our coolant, which was low. We took out all the ignition coils and the spark plugs. We sprayed fogging oil in the cylinders. We cranked the engine a couple of times in drown mode. Then we took out the battery, which the compartment is now empty. And here's the battery sitting right here. So we're going to make sure we store that during the wintertime. Probably store it in my garage. Make sure that if it's sitting on the ground, that it's not directly on concrete, that it's actually sitting on a piece of wood, because that'll apparently not be good for the battery. So it needs to sit on wood if it's going to be sitting on concrete. And that's essentially it. So the winterization process is done. So just a recap of the materials that we needed to winterize this season. We had the fogging oil for the engine, the anti-seize material for the spark plug threads so that you can get them out next time, the fuel stabilizer, the plumbing antifreeze, and then for mine I needed the engine coolant to replace that. And then we had cut off basically tube or garden hose to be able to put the antifreeze through the flush system, and a couple of funnels, a ratchet set which was very handy. I used the 3/8 for most of the work today. The extension was very handy, the 6-inch extension, and then the 5/8 socket, spark plug socket, was really important and helpful as well too. Also, if you're going to do the engine oil change, then you could use the engine oil kit that comes online, which I got from Amazon, and essentially it. So if I could do it, anybody can do it. Probably took a total of, for me, about 45 minutes, just because I was relatively new. It was the first time I did it. But I think next time, now that I know what I'm doing, it could probably take a maximum of 20-25 minutes. Hopefully that was helpful to you guys, and we'll talk to you guys later.